Greetings, seekers of the supernatural. Welcome to Paranormal M, where we uncover the mysteries that lie beyond the veil of reality. Subscribe now and activate notifications to join us on our quest for the unknown. Prepare to be amazed. I think I might get a new house. For background information, I was 13 when this happened. This happened 4 years ago. My grandfather died at 90 when I was 10. I was in love with the paranormal at the time, and I always find a way to prank someone, so that particular day, I thought to prank my oldest brother. I'll call him Baka number 1. Okay. He didn't believe in the paranormal, and he found it stupid and childish. So I told my other brother I'll call him Baka number 2, to make a plan. And we decided to go out and play near where we buried our grandpa and just scare him off and he'll come out of his damn room. As we were discussing the plan, I noticed a scratch mark on my brother's face. I didn't notice it when he came out. When I asked him about it, he didn't recall scratching himself or anything. That's when I saw a black figure move past me and I was so frickin' scared. But I brushed it off thinking my mind was just playing with it. I saw a footprint right where I saw it, and I'd looked around to find any more footprints, but I didn't. And I was not feeling the vibe, which usually doesn't happen. So I decided to go inside without doing the prank. Right that second, I felt a hand to pull my leg. It was definitely not my brother, since he was walking in front of me, so I was freaked out and I froze. Couldn't move at all, and for a minute I couldn't hear anything at all. When I came back to reality, I ran inside, locked my frickin' door so fast. I experienced the same shit. Emoji of painting fingernails. Today, at my grandfather's death anniversary. You're a strange one. Something followed me home. This happened when I was 16 in the Rocky Mountains. My father and I used to love ghost hunting. He used to do it all the time when he was a teen. He lived in a small town in the mountains that was founded by Mormon pioneers. During our family reunion in said small town, we were camping. He thought it would be fun to bring me and a couple of my cousins to a cemetery known for being haunted. This cemetery was very small and consisted of Native Americans and pioneers. It was old and most of the graves were unmarked. I didn't know much about ghost hunting and the rules, so I thought it would be interesting to see if I could capture a recording of their voices. I called out to the space and asked if anybody was there. My cousins tried asking questions as well. We asked if anything could try and make a sound, touch us, or move something. I handed the recording and I listened to it. Nothing was on it. Disheartened, we went back to the reunion and went to bed. The next day I went to my mom's house. Everything seemed completely normal until I went to bed. That night I tried to get my dog to come to bed with me, but I couldn't find her anywhere. Which was weird, because she came to bed with me every night. I was very tired, so I just went to my room and went to bed alone. In the middle of the night, I jolted awake. There was an alarm clock next to my bed. It read exactly 3 o'clock. I sat up and heard a slight scratching sound. I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. As that sound grew louder, the doorknob started to jiggle. It slowly turned all the way around, and the door creaked open. It opened all the way, and the door was like a black, smoky-looking creature, taller than the frame itself. He had glowing yellow eyes, and I could make out its mouth with sharp-looking teeth. I immediately freaked the hell out and backed away, threw my covers over my head, and as I did so, I saw it jolt in my direction. I could feel it jump onto my bed. It was almost slithering around, saying things in a tongue I didn't recognize. I was crying and pleading with the universe to save me. I didn't sleep. It stopped around 6 in the morning. I fell asleep after that and woke up around 11. Honestly, I couldn't figure out if the previous night was a dream or reality. But when I saw the door ajar, I knew it had actually happened. I had no idea what to do to protect myself. So the next night I made sure to find my dog, who was a border collie. I went to bed and she was at my feet, seemingly a little anxious. I woke up again right at 3. I could see my dog staring into the corner and I pulled her a little closer to me. I felt her hair standing straight up on edge. She started growling, and I could see what she was growling at. In the corner of my room I saw it again, standing and staring at me, not moving, but smiling awkwardly. My dog was trying to inch closer, growling intently. As she did, the creature vanished. Of course, I didn't sleep until I thought it was safe to do so. The next day I looked up what to do online. I read that you should buy incense to burn and say a blessing stating that nothing is allowed to enter the space or follow me. So I did exactly that. I bought the incense and went through my entire house and every entryway and said a blessing to prevent the creature from returning. That night I held my dog close, prayed that nothing would happen. Nothing did happen or come back since then. I'm always on edge about this ever since. What if one day that thing decides it wants me again? What if it gets enough power to come back? Conga drums, sacred beats. Evil spirit summoned. This happened to my brother and dad in high school. My brother summoned an evil spirit with conga drums with the sacred book. It was super late at night. I'm thinking when he told me this, I was asleep the whole time. He described this happening immediately after playing these sacred beats. All the dogs started barking in the neighborhood. A burning, gross smell arose, and that was how he described it. My brother got sudden paralysis with a dark evil entity staring over him, tormenting his mind. My dad woke up to the dogs barking, a burning, putrid smell, but couldn't move. He had the same paralysis with a dark, sinister entity looking over him, making threats, trying to torment him. My dad is not scared of anything, and I was telling the entity, "I'ma fuck you up when I get out of this. I'ma pray to Jesus Christ," etc. As soon as he broke free, he went into my brother's room because he saw the light was on. "What the fuck did you do?" My brother, scared out of his mind, shocked, had also broken free from it before my dad went in, but was still in a shocked daze, told him what happened. They threw the book away and prayed to Christ to get rid of this evil entity. All they could smell was that putridness. After many prayers and our Father's prayers, things calmed down, smell went away, dogs stopped barking. If you are religious or not, it doesn't matter to me. I truly believe this was another case of Christ coming to the rescue with prayer. You don't want to open these gateways and summon these spirits. My ghostly encounter. I'm currently 39 years old. I live in Scotland. The story I'm about to tell you happened from the age of 1 to 1.5 years old. When I was just under a year old, my mother's grandfather, Tom, passed away. He had been unwell for a while after suffering from a stroke. Before he passed away, my mom would take me to visit him and my great-grandmother daily. He was a family-oriented man, and he adored me. My mother would tell me how much he loved spending time with me, and he would always tickle me and love the sound of my laughter. About 3 months after he passed away, my mother and father were awoken one night by the sound of laughter coming from my bedroom. When they both entered my room, they found me laying in my cot. I was rolling around and giggling. They settled to me again for the night, not thinking too much about it until it happened again the following night, and each night thereafter. For the next couple of months, this continued. Understandably, this started to creep my father out. My mother and her family, on the other hand, started to wonder if I was perhaps being visited during the night. As the weeks passed, I started to give my mother and father details about my nighttime giggles. Once my speech started to develop, I began to give them clues as to what I was finding so funny in the wee hours of the morning. One night, my parents were woken up by the sound of my laughter and could hear me shouting, "Man!" They quickly entered my room to find me standing in my cot staring at the bed directly across from me. My parents asked, "What is it?" I replied, "Man," pointing to the bed. This continued, but as the weeks went on, more information I gave. I'd tell them, "Man, tickle me," or they'd hear me shouting, "Stop tickle me, man." I started to describe him. I said he had a hat and a tickly face and pointed to above the lip. My great-grandfather had passed away when I was under a year old. He wore a bonnet, a traditional Scottish hat, and had a mustache. My family were convinced I was being visited by my late great-grandfather. Even my father, who was a skeptic. Once I started to give this information, my nighttime visits and the laughter stopped. About 17 years ago, a psychic told me I have a male spirit with me who looks out for me. He told me he's always been with me since I was a baby. His name is Tom. I'm at peace now. "10 years ago I met someone. It all began outside of a local nightclub. For the purpose of anonymity, I'll refer to him as G. G approached me with a rose that he had purchased from a street peddler. He'd come across as charming, had the most infectious smile. I felt butterflies in my stomach and I was instantly attracted to him. As the months passed, and the more time that we spent with each other, I fell head over heels for him. I had left a toxic marriage the year previous, and G made me feel safe while I was with him. Laying in his arms was my safe space. G was well known within his profession. Took him all over the world. His professional life kept him busy, and my profession and children kept me equally as busy. But we did see each other as much as we could, but it was never as much as I would have liked. 8 months in, G broke news to me that brought my world crashing down around me. He told me that he had been in a long-distance relationship since before we met, and she had moved to our town. I can't even put into words how devastated I was. It broke my heart. I was so in love with him, and I couldn't breathe with the pain I was in. I lay on him for hours and we both cried. He told me he didn't know who to be with, and he broke me and the other woman's heart in the process. At that time, I didn't want any more kids. He used that as the decider in that moment. As the days passed, I fell deeper and deeper into despair. It was Christmas time, and all I wanted to do was curl up in a ball and cry. G kept in contact, checking in on me. Within a week, he invited me to his home. As weak as it was May, it seems like I couldn't stop myself. As weak as it may seem, I couldn't stop myself. I was back laying in his arms, and all the pain was gone. I didn't ask about her. I didn't want to know. For the next 3 months, we continued this way. It was up and down, and I was on edge in case he walked away again. The other woman appeared to be out of the picture, but I was scared in case he was seeing her at the same time still. We got into a fight over my suspicion. Stopped talking. A couple of weeks later, I was laying on my sofa watching TV. My phone lit up with a message. It was G. The message read, "I still love you." All those feelings washed over me again. I replied with, "I love you too." My phone rang, and it was G telling me that he was about to arrive at my home. The door knocked, I answered, and we were right back how it was always between us. Passionate and intoxicating. A few days later, we ran into the same old issues. I wanted more commitment, and he didn't. I just couldn't do it anymore. My heart was being torn into pieces, and my emotions were all over the place. I had to face facts that this wasn't going to end the way I wanted it to. I had to walk away for good. I told G I hated him, that he was devious, and wanted him to hate me. That way I could move on. I gave him back the gifts that he had given me. I never spoke to him again. Thought about him over the years, looked at his social media, and that gut-wrenching feeling would still be there. I pushed the feeling away and instead would turn it to anger to stop myself from thinking about him. Last year in autumn, I was sitting rocking my newborn baby, who I have to my second marriage. G popped into my head. The temptation to check his social media took over. I guess I just wanted to see if he had any kids himself now. A couple of years ago, I found out that he had met a woman around the time I met my husband, and they got married too. As I typed his name to the search bar, I saw a post from his wife. It was a picture of them both, and it was captioned, "Miss you." I stared at the screen, trying to figure it out. Was he working away or somewhere or something? I looked on his profile, no recent posts. I put his name back into the search bar and searched posts relating to his name. What I was faced with sent my head spinning in my stomach in knots. Rest in peace. I couldn't take it in. I searched through every post and read the contents and comments, and I paced around, couldn't believe what I was seeing. I just sat wondering, what happened? Was he ill? Was he in an accident? Later that night, I had an awful feeling. Like myself, G suffered with depression. We were on the same medication, and what if he died due to this? For 2 months, I sat with no answers, head swimming in disbelief and tried to block it out. Blocking it out was manageable because I was dealing with a new baby. December rolled in and I found myself frantically searching online to try to find out what happened to G. Then I found an article about a man his age dying by suicide, and that was on the same day that he died. It was horrific. I just knew in my heart it was him. After some more deep diving through social media, I found posts from his family about suicide awareness. Felt like I was in a bad dream, unreal, just didn't feel real. I believed what I was seeing, but I wouldn't let it sink in. I just felt numb. I tried to talk to my husband about it too, and he was understanding, said it's okay to feel this way, and that he was a part of your life. I didn't cry, I just felt sad. But in true me fashion, I shoved it down, started to block it out. He drifted in and out of my thoughts since. I'd close my eyes, take a deep breath, try not to think about him. Last week, it all changed. I dreamt about him. I dreamt I was back with him in his house. The same feeling of longing and comfortability, his infectious smile. I woke up feeling like I couldn't breathe. My heart felt so heavy, and I just wanted to curl up in a ball and cry like I did all those years ago. The days following, grief hit me like a tidal wave. I couldn't control the tears, and my heart was aching, and all the memories of him playing through my thoughts, listening to the songs that he listened to and songs that reminded me of him. Hiding my grief from my husband even too. I didn't understand what was happening. I wouldn't expect him to. He wouldn't know. I just sat asking G in my head over and over again, why? On Sunday, I awoke feeling just as horrific as I had the days prior. I decided to go visit the local spiritualist center, try to give myself some peace. I'm quite a spiritual person and believe in the afterlife and the paranormal. On the way there, I walked slowly, just taking in the spring air. G heavily in my thoughts, fighting back my tears. I arrived and took a seat. I sat there hoping I might hear something from G. The medium present began just by giving a reading, sort of. The words reflected how I felt. I fought hard to keep the tears in. The medium began to speak to individuals around the room. I wasn't really taking it in because I was just kind of willing to hear her speak to me. After speaking to the third person, she turns her gaze to me. She told me, "I have a young man here." She then made reference to the musical instrument that he played. I froze. That was the instrument G played. She looked at me and said, "He didn't pass that long ago." She stopped and said, "He's left you with a heavy heart. He said to tell you he's sorry for what he did. He said the voices and thoughts won and he didn't want to be here anymore, but he's at peace now." The tears began to fall from me as I choked back the sobs, and she said, "He's showing me him stroking your face on both sides with both hands. He did do this." She then told me the date of his birthday, date and month, and the age I was when we met. She finished up by saying, "He said he'll always be with you." Never in all the years I've been to these places or saw mediums have I ever experienced anything as surreal as this. Whether you are a believer or not, I hope the comfort this gave me touches at least someone. I love my husband, but I'll also always love G. Feeling he's around me has helped me. At least as I go through what I can only describe as being heartbroken and losing him for the second time. That was a good story. I think my dorm is haunted. So for starters, I can literally see an old Civil War era graveyard from my dorm window. The first day we moved in, my roommate had a really weird dream where she went out into the hallway at night and saw a woman dressed in a black gown standing on the other end of the hall. She'd be staring her down. We both have had multiple dreams similar to this since. Kind of weird, but explainable. Then we both started hearing each other's voices when we were completely alone in the room. I once woke up to the sound of her voice in my ear, only for her to be completely asleep on the other side of the room. One time, my roommate was alone in the dorm. She left her phone on her desk, then went to go to the bathroom. She came back and her phone was on the floor on the other side of the room. The same thing happened to me, but with my student ID. It had somehow gotten to her side of the room by her mirror, even though I hadn't been over there all day and had left it on my desk. I had a dream about a little girl wearing old-timey clothing and pink ribbons in her hair. In the dream, she was holding my hand. We were walking around, and I had this eerie feeling that the little girl wasn't alive. I woke up with full-body shivers. Finally, the absolute last straw. My roommate and I were both sitting on our beds doing homework, and all of a sudden my roommate's nose starts gushing blood. She starts getting up to grab a tissue, and the top shelf part of her desk moved forward across the desk by itself, flipped over her chair onto the floor. The desk was up against the wall. There was literally nothing that could have pushed it forward. Sounds haunted to me. I don't know where to go with this. Context. Male 31. Ever since I can remember, I've been troubled by the same recurring experiences. I began to have these experiences at night in western New York, and that something was trying to get into my window. At the time I was young, and it was mostly attributed to an active imagination. I continued to have these feelings and experiences at night, which didn't stop until I went on a school trip to the Algonquin tribe. I made a dream catcher, which I hung in my room. I've basically had a dream catcher ever since. Problem. Whenever I sort of stay at a location for multiple nights in a row, I end up having a very similar experience as to the one in my childhood. I'll have a terrible nightmare and know that I should not go back to sleep. Here's the most recent example. Spending the week at a resort in the DR for the wife's 30th birthday. What's the DR? We're having the absolute best time. It's super relaxing and an amazing experience. This is now our last night. We go to sleep early so we can wake up and have one last long day in paradise before returning home. I go to sleep quickly as often as I really can, and in the middle of the night, wake up, go use the restroom. This isn't common for me, nor is it strange, though. After returning to bed, I fall asleep again rapidly. I have an extremely vivid dream where I'm walking in a semi-arid / temperate wooded area. I approach a cliff where I see a cave. Inside the cave, there is loss. It's more of a feeling than anything I see or experience. I investigate the cave further, learn of a creature living within the cave which takes the form of a human and lures its prey to this place. As I investigate further and try to understand, my mind becomes more conscious, begins to feel within the dream. It's at that point when the creature emerges and begins to approach me. I wake and remain awake the rest of the night. I don't know if this is the right place to be putting this or asking about this, but I'm very curious if anybody knows or has any ideas what it might be. I've heard a lot of the same: childhood trauma, anxiety, depression, etc. But I'm a very balanced individual without any other signs or symptoms of mental health conditions. I've read a little bit about what I'm experiencing, and no one seems to put an exact name to it. There are Native American stories of W************, which sound like a prime suspect to me. These powerful spirits seem to inhabit a location. They don't follow a person their entire life. There's also the S*******, W******, which is less likely regional, but it's a similar concept. Beyond that thought, really crossed my mind, just a general evil spirit or ghost. Okay, guys, fill in the asterisks for me. My 3 paranormal experiences as a teenager. I have 3 stories. For context, I grew up in the hillbilly South, in an area that was Civil War battlegrounds, and was known to have a lot of paranormal activity around it. I also grew up in the country, in an area with lots of woods around, so you can imagine that nighttime was pretty spooky. 1. When I was around 14, my parents got divorced. My dad had an affair and married the woman that he had the affair with. A couple of years later, his new wife passed away. When she passed, he told me that he didn't want to sleep in there. My parents and he in my stepmom's old bedroom. So he took my room. I took my parents' old bedroom. One night I was getting ready for bed and I went to close the bathroom door. The bathroom was attached to the bedroom and there was only one way in and one way out. I closed the bathroom door, turned off the lights, and got into bed. I closed my eyes only to hear knocking from inside the bathroom door. At first, I assumed something fell, but then the knocking got more persistent and fast. It felt like there was someone inside the bathroom knocking to get out. I've never ran so fast to my sister's room. I asked her if I could sleep with her, and we cried because we were both scared. 2. This is when I was around 14. This was before I switched rooms with my dad. I had joined the girls' soccer team at my school. During that summer, we would stay at each other's houses and have sleepovers. This specific night, I was at another friend's house and didn't go. My sister was on the volleyball team at her school and had early morning practice the next day. My dad goes to bed at like 7 because, well, he's a dialysis nurse, works really early shifts. So this way, even on the days he's not working, he still goes to bed early. This will tie into the story later, When I woke up at my friend's house the next morning, I got a text from some of the soccer girls. They said, "Did Katie lose her phone in your yard? Will you go out and check if it's there?" I had no idea what they were talking about, so I called them. Apparently that night at around midnight, they went and rolled my house as a prank. When they got to my house, they saw the lights in my bedroom were on and two figures, me and my sister's height, were in the room. They were pacing back and forth. Suddenly the figures turned their heads as if to look out the window at the soccer girls rolling my house. I was a little bit in shock at first, because I wasn't home that night. Then when I got to my house, I asked my sister if she had a friend over last night. She said no, she went to bed at 8 because she had early morning volleyball practice. I asked my dad if he had been in my room or had anybody over. He said no. He went to bed at his usual time, and to this day I still don't know what that was, or what they saw. But I'm 26 now, and I still can't go into that room without getting chills. 3. This story to this day is the one that freaks me out the most. I was about 15 when this one happened. It was a normal day when my friends dropped off at his dad's after soccer. He wasn't home. I was waiting for my mom to come pick me up to stay with her and my stepdad for a few days. I was there alone for a couple of hours while she was still at work. I remember exactly what I was doing and exactly what I was watching. I was eating chips in the living room on the couch watching America's Next Top Model. The sun was setting and it was getting dark. The sun had finally set, and around 10 minutes later I had this dreadful feeling inside. It was a feeling like someone or something was watching me. I tried to ignore it at first, but the feeling persisted. Finally, I turned my head to look out the window and I saw a face. It wasn't a normal face. It was sort of human, but also not. The one distinct thing about this face that to this day I'll never forget is its big yellow cat-like eyes that were staring at me. It wasn't a cat, though. It had a human nose and a mouth, but yellow cat eyes. I froze when I saw it, didn't take my eyes away. I was scared if I looked away that it'd disappear. I'd be more afraid of not knowing where it was. I just stared, pulled out my phone, and called my mom to ask if she was almost done. She told me she was 1 minute down the road. I asked her if she would come inside and get me when she got here. When her headlights came up the driveway, the face disappeared. Can't rationally explain it to this day. Paranormal experience. There's so much, and I don't know if I can or should include all of it, so I'll summarize instead. But when I was younger, I experienced weird things. It started with little things that could be easily rationalized, but then it started progressing. I was like maybe 7th or 8th grade. It stopped when I was a junior in high school. I would experience horrible, long, realistic nightmares. Like I would remember 7 different dreams in one night and wake up feeling exhausted because they were horrible dreams. I won't give specifics if asked, because they were being pretty long. I would feel kicked under my bed and I couldn't sleep because of it. I've seen things just looking at me, and over time I thought it was just me and questioned my sanity. Except my family also experienced things too. My sister went to the bathroom once, said the curtain opened all the way and she ran out. My dad also felt things, and he's a skeptic. My other sister slept in the same room once, said that she saw things over me and heard voices. My mom had a weird friend. She was into the Santa Muerte and whatnot, and according to her, they did something. Not sure what, but she did tell me things were attached to me. I don't really trust her or what she does. One day when I was working on a school project with friends, we were at the park, and all of a sudden there was just a bunch of bugs or flies over me. It was like a pillar above my head and they would follow me wherever I walked, even if it was just a step. I didn't say anything thinking this was weird, but somebody else noticed and they were like, "What, are you possessed?" It was crazy. But I believe that was around the time all that stuff stopped. No more intense nightmares, no more kicking under my bed, no more ice-cold beds, and no feeling or hearing things. I never really got answers to what it was or what happened. And I don't know, I guess I'm sharing my story because I want to know more though. A little unsure if I should. I tread carefully. I'm not sure what to make of this. So this has been happening for a while now. I'd like to know if it's my mind playing tricks or not. For the past couple of months, usually in the evening, my younger brother would come into my room and over to where I'm sitting and lean over my shoulder. I have a desk bunk bed kind of situation, my back towards the door which stays closed, but open enough so my dog can come in and out. When my brother does this, he'll lean real close to my face and ask what I'm doing. And more often than not, I've got headphones in, so I don't hear him coming in. However, there have been times, that it happens quite a lot actually, where I felt the hair on the top of my head move like it's being lightly touched, and I've heard footsteps coming into my bedroom and over me and leaning over my shoulder. Now I've seen a face in the corner of my eye, although my hair was down, so I can't be completely sure. Although I felt breathing on me, around my shoulder and to the side of my face, just like my brother does sometimes, to the point where I've turned around to tell him to leave and there's nothing there. I don't know if it's just my mind playing tricks on me or what, but I'd appreciate the help. My experience with the entity I named It. As a child, the basement always freaked me out. The basement area of my childhood home had my parents' room, our laundry room, and a playroom with a TV and an N64. My dislike of the basement aside, I spent most of my free time in the playroom. The basement was partially underground, so the rooms got extremely dark very quickly. My dad worked early mornings and would leave his door open at night. He would wake up and get upset at me if I had the lights on in the playroom, so I would play games in the dark at night, which always creeped me out. I would always avoid setting foot in my parents' room if I could help it. It was dark, cold, and eerie to me. It always felt as though someone was staring at me. It had an oppressive atmosphere, and I loathed being in there. My dad had problems with substance abuse. He would always reek of alcohol and would mix different sorts of painkillers and sleeping pills with the booze. And that would have unpleasant effects for the rest of the family. The addiction poisoned his relationship with my mom and his daughters, and I'm assuming his liver. We would always tiptoe around him to make sure that we wouldn't anger him, because he would hit us and scream at us until he was purple in the face. He would always sulk and watch TV in his room and would shout for me to bring him beer after beer, which forced me to get into the room I hated the most. Growing up, I would have a recurring dream of floating up and out of my body and flying around my house and neighborhood, rejoicing in the freedom of flight. If I went back to my room, I could see my body sleeping in bed, and when the dream ended, I'd float back into my body. One night I had the flying dream. I was making my way down the hall to the rest of my house, and my dad rounded the corner and started walking toward my room. My gut told me not to let him touch me, so I flew to the ceiling and laid flat across it. When my dad stepped underneath me, his head jerked up and he looked straight in my eyes, basically. His eyes were completely black. I flew down the hall as fast as I could and soared up high and far over the house as I could. Never had a flying dream again after that. When I was 12, my dad was drunk while I was playing outside with the volleyball. I lost control of the ball and it bounced off the bumper of his new truck. He screamed at me to come inside and yelled at me until his voice was hoarse. Once it hurt him too badly to yell, he punched a wall beside my head. Unfortunately for him, he punched a tack and broke his knuckle. The next day at work, he faked an injury and was prescribed opiate painkillers. These he, of course, mixed with alcohol. My parents divorced because of the drugs, and after my dad left, all the negative energy I associated with my parents' room moved into my room. Whenever I was in my room alone, I felt as though someone was staring at me with hatred. When I would round the corner to the hallway that led to my room, the long, skinny hallway with my room at the very end and the closet door across from my door, I would catch a glimpse of a shadow going into my room. I always tried to bring a cat with me to bed, but they would cry at my door until I let them out. They never came into the room on their own accord. One night I was home alone and turning off all the lights in the house before I went to bed. I had always hated the hallway to my room, because the light switch was at the end of the hall next to my door with the light fixture in the middle of the ceiling above the switch. I turned that light on and made my rounds around the house. After all the other lights were off, I made my way to my room. When I stood beneath the light at the end of the hall, I noticed to my horror that my shadow was projected onto the wall in front of me. The shadow grew steadily larger and its arms and legs were moving even though I was frozen with fear. Bolted in my room, turned on all the lights, and slept with the TV on that night. Sometimes in the early morning, before 5 a.m., but I'm not sure what exact time, I heard an indistinct mumbling while I slept. I awoke and looked to see a dark shadow with huge yellow eyes floating in my doorway. It was about 2 feet tall and looked like 2 beach balls-shaped blobs of darkness stacked on top of each other. It was looking right at me and it was mumbling and it was growing louder. I huddled in the corner of my room underneath the blankets. The next day I was sitting in my room on my laptop. I noticed a red blob on the wall. I went to investigate it. It slowly started rolling up the wall and left a trail of what looked like blood in its wake on a white wall. I ran out of the room, and when I came back, the red mark was gone. Later that same week, I woke up in the middle of the night. It was pitch black in my room, and I felt compelled to look around. I noticed a dark red pinpoint light zipping around my room in patterns similar to a fly. Then it shot into my TV, which started to hum. In the center of the screen, a small flashing green sphere appeared. It grew larger with each flash. I realized the sphere had features. Do you know the happy and sad theater masks? The green flash looked like one of those, but twisted with rage and hate. Once I was able to make out the face, I ran out of the room and slept on our couch that night. The same phenomenon happened every day for months. I tried sleeping with my TV on to see if it would stop the face from appearing. But almost every night the TV would turn off by itself, and the red light and flashing face would appear again. After several months of near nightly terrors, I decided to move into my living room and sleep on the couch. At the end of the school year, my mom let me throw a little party for all my friends. It was after the last day of school, and I was 13 at the time. One of my friends, let's call her Mary, had never been to my house before and really wanted to see my room. I never went in there, at least, unless I absolutely had to do so. And I'd usually make up an excuse that was too messy to have people in it. Later that night, she tried to sneak in. I blocked off the hallway so she couldn't get past me. After she left, I looked toward my room and saw a dark smoke oozing from beneath the door and snaking its way down the hall. The smoke smelled strongly of sulfur. Turned tail and ran back to the group. At this point, I wanted to get out of the house, so I just suggested that we go jump on my trampoline in the backyard. We were all having a good time outside. It was dusk at this point. That's when my best friend pointed out the window and said, "Who's that?" We all looked up and saw that light in my room was on. There was a black hooded figure in the window looking down at us. All of my guests were outside at this point. My mom was at work and my sister was on a camping trip, so this freaked us out quite a bit. We all ran inside to investigate and found the light off, and no one else was in the room. Most of my guests thought I had played a prank on them. The rest of the night was uneventful, and in the morning all of my guests except my best friend left. My best friend, let's call her Ella, she was a practicing Wiccan at the time and was one of the few people I had told of my experiences. The others being my mom and sister, who didn't believe me and would get upset if I brought it up. Ella told me that she had felt uncomfortable in my house since the first day she came over. I met her just before my parents split and we became best friends immediately. She had terrible nightmares every time she spent the night. That afternoon, she went into my room by herself. She'd never set foot in there before. She went to investigate it. Came out white as a sheet. She said, "Lallyby, this is the most evil I've ever felt in my life." Just after she said that, my house felt incredibly tense. It was as though acknowledging the entity as evil gave it more power and could feel the house growing colder, even though it was a hot late June day. My family was too poor to afford air conditioning. We were home alone again, as my mom had left for work before Ella went into my room. The tension in the house continued to grow and the atmosphere grew ever more oppressive. I felt physically heavy when I was inside the house. As the day grew darker, the malevolence pushed in around us. We stayed in my living room, which was as far from my room as you could get in my house. My cats were outside and wouldn't come when called. My dog was glued to my side. He would occasionally growl and whine at the doorway to the kitchen, which had my hallway beyond it. Once while he was growling, I followed his gaze and floated away from us with like an inky black blob that seemed to be trailing wisps of smoke. Once the sun went down, my house became unbelievably cold. Ella and I wore sweaters, coats, long pants, and socks, but we couldn't seem to keep warm. We were ice cold, even huddled together under a blanket. We decided to make soup to hopefully warm us up from the inside. In my kitchen, the microwave was suspended above the stove. We got out a pan and then heard a scratching sound coming from the inside of the microwave. The scratches would come in sets of 3, then pause for a moment and begin again. The scratching was incredibly loud and deliberate sounding, not random like an animal digging. We freaked out, decided to go outside on my trampoline. It was dark outside, but I had bright floodlights in the backyard, so I wasn't worried. Once we got outside, we ended up needing to take off our sweaters and jackets. We were far too warm. We huddled together on the trampoline in extreme fear, and my dog laid right underneath us. I looked up at my bedroom window, saw that the light was on, and the hooded figure was back in the window. I started to tell Ella when the outside light shut off, and we were in complete darkness. My bedroom light was off as well, and my dog barked and ran back inside through the doggy door as fast as he could. We then heard a rustling sound in the grass beneath us. Ella and I looked at the ground in the pitch darkness, and what I saw still gives me shivers. Imagine a large black towel floating and rippling in water, but shedding wisps of smoke. This was trailing around the trampoline in slow circles, almost like a shark circling a boat. Even though it was extremely dark outside, we could see by the faint light of the moon. Also, the shape seemed to be darker than the shadows it crawled across. After it got to the backside of the trampoline, we ran as fast as we could back into my house. Ella and I huddled beneath the blankets on my love seat and decided to watch a Disney movie to try to just calm ourselves down. She got up to start the movie. I was sitting with my legs folded underneath myself. Both of my feet were jammed into the couch cushions. My dog was sitting next to the couch. My dog growled right as Ella was coming back on the couch, and I suddenly feel what felt like 2 ice-cold claws. They were slowly dragging up my left foot from heel to toe. Needless to say, I flipped the fuck out. Begged her to stay at her house for the rest of the night. And luckily, Ella only lived a few blocks away, so we sped walked to her house. On the way there, if there was a house with a dog, the dog would be sitting right at the edge of the fence staring at us silently. The dogs would also be missing their lower jaws. The tongues would be drooping. Blood would be pouring from the open wounds as they turned their heads to stare at us. When I walked home the next day, I saw most of the dogs, and they were completely fine. Whew. The story ends in an uneventful way. We smudged the shit out of my house, burning sage, and Ella invited some friends over to hold some sort of cleansing ritual. My home no longer had the negative energy, but weird shit continued to happen there until I moved out when I was 22. The Gentleman. I grew up in a haunted house in a town near Seattle. The houses of my suburb were surrounded by evergreens and large rhododendrons, which made each home seem private and secretive. Another day I'll make a post for my other experiences. Spooky stuff happened to me all the time, but never to any of my family members. I saw shadow people, astral projections, but never really anymore, sadly. I also had an imaginary friend who manifested to me as real as another person would. I'd also had a terrifying year where a demon tormented me. At times, my friend would see the phenomenon as well. I was a kindergartner, 5 or 6 in the States. Met my best friend Lenore. We became friends till the end. Thick as thieves, we were each other's rocks until the age of 16. Lenore suffered from severe depression and suicidal thoughts, despite being a straight-A student, artistically and musically talented, and pretty popular. Not to mention she was absolutely gorgeous. Her family was comfortable with multiple vacations per year, some of which I was invited to. It just really goes to show that mental illness can strike anyone from any background. She had witnessed some of the spooky bullshit that went down in my house, as she was there frequently. My mom was closer to her than my own. My home was a short walk from our high school and tucked away in a quiet cul-de-sac. Therefore, it was a frequent hangout spot for my friends, especially since my mom was mellow and welcoming. One day in June, I was walking to my house with Lenore. The weather was sunny, warm, and clear. Quiet, beautiful, unassuming. As we walked side by side down the long, straight street, Lenore suddenly stopped in her tracks. I looked over at her, and her face was blanched white. Her eyes wide open and her mouth open in a wide O shape. She was staring down the street. I followed her gaze to look at the crossroads at the end of the road about a half block away. At the light pole stood a peculiar man. He was dressed in a black tuxedo, black top hat, cane, and a cape with a tall sort of demeanor. When my eyes found him, he flourished his cape, tipped his hat, bowed, and then disappeared in a flash. Lenore looked at me flabbergasted. We both agreed that we had seen the figure. The next 3 nights I dreamt of this gentleman. He appeared to me in the darkness next to a gondola, told me that he would take me to the other side if I just would pay the price. Each night I pleaded with him, saying I needed to live. He was never pushy. He never scared me. He was calm, quiet, and seemed calm and understanding. He just said he would offer his services if I ever needed them after telling him no. On the 4th day, Lenore ended her life. I never dreamt of the gentleman again. I wonder if he visited her the same way he visited me. Was his offer too much to handle for someone so deeply sad and scared? Has anybody else seen him? I'm severely damaged by my friend's death. Please reach out if you're hurting to the point of wanting to end it all. Life is hard and everyone's struggling. I second that. I got choked in my sleep and scared my boyfriend. Me and my boyfriend live in an old building, a studio apartment. Before it was an apartment, it was a mental institution. Crazy, I know. My dreams started out when we moved into an apartment. It wasn't the same one that we live in now. We had a blessing and a housewarming party. When everything and everyone was over, my mom and my grandma stayed to put things away, such as gifts and pots and pans. I picked up a box, turned my body, saw through a window, like through another building. There was a lady looking straight at me. Now, this isn't my first time seeing a creepy person in my dreams, and I was telling myself she's not real, it's just a dream. So I turned away and I calmed down. And this was all in my dream. I was trying to have a nice little dream. I looked up again and saw her through another window. Keep in mind, in my dream, that window wasn't on the wall. I made eye contact, she came at me full speed and started choking me. I woke up, eyes open, but couldn't move and still was seeing her directly on top of me. It was choking me. It was like I woke up and started coughing, choking on my saliva or something. According to my boyfriend, I looked like I was held against my will with my eyes rolled back, with my eyelids struggling to be open and just not breathing. My boyfriend freaked out, started shaking me because, fun fact, when we started dating, I told him sometimes when I sleep, if I tap him continuously, which is the best I can do when these things happen, it's to shake me. So, first time he shook me, she went away. But I felt my eyes being so heavy. My body was falling asleep, but my mind was telling myself to stay awake. I was literally fighting my sleep. My eyes fully closed, and I saw her again, and she just kept doing it continuously until my boyfriend eventually sat me up and shook me. I then told my mom what happened, and she full-on described how she looked from head to toe. Told my boyfriend that I have a weak soul and that I'm an easy target, that I shouldn't sleep on the outside, as that's an easy access. Bed's against the wall and outside, meaning I'm not sandwiched between him and the wall. Since then, my boyfriend always sleeps on the outside. Sounds like a plan. A seance at my grandma's 80th birthday changed my life. I want to start off by saying that my whole life I've never really believed in the paranormal. I'm a STEM girly, and I've always kind of had a I'll believe it when I see it type of attitude about this kind of stuff. I'm also not really spiritual or religious, so up until now I've always believed that when we die, we're dead. There's no afterlife, no reincarnation, just nothing. I've just always thought that if there's not demonstrable scientific evidence of life after death, why should I believe? But all that changed after the events of this last weekend. This weekend was my grandma's 80th birthday. For her birthday present, I completed a crochet afghan that her mom, my great-grandmother, sort of started making for her, but she passed before it was ever finished. Everyone in the family had gotten an afghan except for my grandma. She was the last one, and was always heartbroken that she only had half the blanket. I was so excited to give it to her because I know how meaningful it was. The night before her birthday party, I had a really strange dream. I remember walking down a familiar street in my hometown, turning, walking up the steps of a house that also felt familiar, but I didn't immediately recognize it. I remember the front garden, it was full of cosmos and marigolds. And in the dream, I walked through the open front door and into the living room. That's where I saw an old woman with her back facing me, sitting in a chair. She was softly singing a song I knew, but couldn't quite place it. I walked around to face her and immediately recognized my grandma's afghan in her lap. The same one that I just finished, and the woman holding it, crocheting it, was my great-grandmother. She died long before I was born, but I recognized her from pictures I've seen in my grandma's house. When I woke up, I realized that my house was the same one my grandma had grown up in, though I've only ever driven past it. I know that the front looks like that, and I also knew that my great-grandmother's favorite flowers were cosmos and marigolds. Now, obviously, a lot of stuff about this dream struck me as odd, but rather struck. But especially the fact that I never remember my dreams, yet this one remained vivid in my mind. I brushed it off, assuming I just felt emotional in anticipation of giving my grandma her blanket, went downstairs to help get our house ready for the party. The party went really well. My grandma was overjoyed when she opened my gift. Yes. She cried happy tears and hugged me. thanking me over and over again for helping her mom be part of the day. When the party had winded down, it was just me, my mom, and the two great-aunts left. My grandma told us that she wanted to do a seance. I was a bit shocked because she and her sisters were raised in a strict Catholic household. And, so far as I knew, Ouija boards were off limits. But she insisted, saying that the Afghan made her realize just how much she missed her mom, that all she wanted on this milestone birthday was to talk to her one last time. My mom, who was extremely spiritual, she practiced Wicca throughout her 20s. She did happen to have a Ouija board in the house, so we got that, some black tourmaline and obsidian crystal towers for protection, per my mom, candles, and an Afghan to help us connect with her spirit. We set it all up on the kitchen table. My mom started the seance, calling out to my great-grandmother's spirit. We sat there for a really long time, waiting for the planchette to move, but it just stayed still. After about 20 minutes of nothing, my grandmother, with tears in her eyes, suggested that we give up. Right after she spoke, the planchette began moving to the no position. We asked if there was somebody here with us. It had moved to yes. We asked for a name. It spelled out Cordy. My great-grandmother's name was Cordelia, but everybody called her Cordy. My grandma and her sisters stared in disbelief. One of them even started crying a little. My grandma began to speak, telling her that she misses her with all her heart, that she thinks about her every time she sees a bird. That was their thing. And how she wishes that my brother and I could have met her. At this point, it might be useful to mention that my great-grandma was an immigrant from Mexico, and although she spoke English fluently, she always preferred Spanish. The next thing the planchette spelled out was my childhood nickname, followed by mucho gusto. Nice to meet you. And at this point, even I started crying. I don't believe in ghosts or Ouija boards, but that got me. After that, the messages got kind of weird and almost seemed incoherent. First, she said, "Hoy por..." Oh, I can't do this. "Hoy por ser," followed by "La luna ya," "Todas las flores," and "Ya la lu," and "On tu cama," and finally "Ya viene." The Spanish speakers here, narrator not included, are probably wondering what the fuck. Or maybe you figured it out quicker than I did, because none of these messages make a ton of sense, especially not when put together. Respectively, they roughly translate to, and I underline the respectively, "Today to be, the moon already, all the flowers, already the light, in your bed, it is coming." We got a little freaked out. My mom warned us that incoherent messages or gibberish can be a sign that we've contacted something dangerous. Insisted that we end the session immediately. We quickly said goodbye, and that was that. We kept looking over the messages, trying to make sense of them. We put them in different orders, trying to make a coherent sentence, and tried to fill in the blanks, all to no avail. We arranged them back in the order that we got them in. After staring at it for a good long while, I thought of something. I did a quick Google search and confirmed my suspicions. They weren't gibberish or random phrases. They were song lyrics. My great-grandmother was sending us the lyrics to the song La Mananitas. Las Mananitas. I can't say it. A birthday song. It's a song she used to sing to my grandma every morning on her birthday. I still really don't get why the messages were so weird and disconnected. So if anybody has insight about that, I'd love to hear it. My grandma was so touched and said it was her best birthday since the last one she spent at her mom's. She was just so happy to have her mom sing her birthday song one last time. And as I went to bed that night, I was hit with one final realization. There was a reason I knew the song my great-grandmother was singing in the dream. It was the same song. Los Mananitas. I don't know what all of this means, and I've been struggling with reconciling these events with everything I've ever believed. The rational part of my brain still trying to come up with a plausible explanation. It was just a dream. Maybe I smoked too much weed before I went to bed that night. Maybe someone was pushing the planchette. Maybe they didn't even realize they were moving it. But I feel like I'm grasping at straws. I really have no idea what happened or why it happened. There was nothing there. Repost. Close to 20 years ago at this point, I was spending a lot of time with my friends Danny and Kate. We were all sitting at Danny's couch watching TV. Danny says, "I'm bored, let's do something." As we suggest things, I say, "Have you guys ever heard of the Smelter?" For background, this takes place in Arizona, in Prescott to be exact. And the Smelter is located in Humboldt, Arizona. It's very old, late 1800s, I think. It used to process materials, I should say. So we started driving out there, smoking cigarettes and listening to music. We arrive, and I start telling them how we hung out here every weekend in junior high. My best friend at the time, Mike, he lived in Humboldt, so we would take girls to the Smelter and drink. Usual kid stuff. Nothing even remotely weird ever happened back then, so that's why I was totally unprepared for what was going to unfold. We approached the outside of the smokestack. I noticed that the stairs had finally been ripped down. I guess whoever owned the property was sick of punk kids entering. I say, guess somebody finally took the stairs out. I then explained the holes every couple feet in the catwalk, that they must have used the holes to shovel the ash. Giving up on entering, we just moved to the side. And after what I'm about to tell you, I'm glad we couldn't get in. Someone definitely would have gotten hurt. So we're outside for about 15 minutes being loud and joking, and then it got really quiet and still. Thousands of bats came screeching out of the windows of the Smelter, and I mean a ridiculous amount. I say to them, "We've been standing out here making noise for close to 20 minutes. We didn't scare those bats." Right when I said that, we heard a loud thud hit the ground, like something heavy fell down in the porthole. Silence. Our eyes widened. Nobody said anything. Another thud. Then one more, and to this day I'll never be able to explain this. We started hearing the loudest screeches ever. Dust started flying up like a bird was dying on the ground, but nothing was there. They were circling us. They were getting closer. All we could do was huddle closer together, and it was like we forgot we could possibly run. I forget who ran first, but I kind of remember being out of it and not thinking correctly. Anyways, we ran, and the first thing Danny said was if somebody told me that story, I wouldn't believe him. Anyways, if anybody has any leads, the rumor is a girl was killed there, but I could never confirm. Always thought it was an urban legend. My cousin is his younger self again. I lost my cousin at about 3, almost maybe 4 years ago, but sometimes it feels like yesterday. My mom only has one other sibling, and we all grew up really close to each other, and my grandmother. I'm talking every weekend at Grandma's house, all the cousins hanging out for 3 days straight. Even as we're all adults, we all still live relatively close to one another drive-wise. He died suddenly from a heart attack from inhaling a lot of butane. Before he died, he was inhaling the butane, turned to drinking, used other items. He died suddenly while he was on his own for a walk. He was 30. I didn't know you could die from inhaling butane. Scary. Now, on to the dream part. This happened a few months ago, but I remember it vividly. My prime for my cousin was when he was 19 or 20. He started working out and was super into video games, especially Super Mario Bros. He loved his DS and his DSi and Xbox. When he visited me in my dreams, we were at my grandma's house. He had his Game Boy Advance with him and he was playing it. He looked like his younger self. I didn't talk because I was confused, but he spoke to me. He said he knew he died and that he'd seen my grandpa and that everything was fine. He knew he died and that he was sorry to my aunt, his mom, because before he died he was lashing out at a lot of people from the alcohol. He said he was at peace and feels better now. Ghost in a care home. In my job, I visit care homes for reviews with residents. I spend most of my day in and out of places for at least a couple of hours at a time, spending like days there at a time sometimes. I've gotten pretty used to the routine. I've had one strange thing once before where my case died. I was in the care home the next week visiting another case, and the staff said the first man's buzzer hadn't stopped going off at night since he died. It had never malfunctioned until then. He was still empty. There's also a basement room in another home where I have to go look at the files. Something happens in that room. The moment you enter, you become sleepy and lethargic. When you leave, you wake up again and go back to normal pretty much. Everything feels very heavy. It's not just me, I asked around the office. Today at work, I was in sort of a larger than usual home. Sat in the nurse station looking through the files, and two people walk in. One woman, one man. I don't look up from my files, but I see them on my side vision. The woman is a staff nurse, and she enters first. The man follows her closely. She crosses the room behind me and reaches for paperwork. It's on one side of me. She then goes to the other side of me and sits down. As she sits down, I become very conscious the man's on my first side where she first retrieved her paperwork. He's still in my side vision. Big burly man, brown hair and hands on his hips wearing blue scrubs. He's facing at me, and the nurse and I can feel him staring down at me. I sort of indistinctly feel like I'm squashed between two people. It's a small office, so you know when you don't get much personal space, you get kind of an ick feeling, like that. I look up to ask if he needs anything, and he's gone. No one's left the room, and it wasn't a person that walked away. He just disappeared, not even a blink of an eye, as soon as I moved my head. Blue scrubs. He even sort of gave the care home uniforms those, but that didn't occur to me until later. Creepy singing outside my window. Last night my family and I were watching The Little Mermaid. It was late, nearly 11. Some of my younger kids had fallen asleep on us earlier, but my older kid were still awake. The credits were on and playing music. Literally as soon as the TV turned off, it was like the music was carrying on with someone singing outside our bay window to the right side. Our blinds were closed and we lived in a house where you have to walk down a long road or driveway, so you're only there on purpose. The singing wasn't words, just a tune. It wasn't like the music on TV, but like an uncanny valley attempt at singing a version of a siren song. It just didn't sound like a proper person. Everyone in the room went silent. We all listened to it. My daughter was just sat next to the window and went white and whispered, "Can you hear that?" My partner said, "Yeah, I'm listening to it." After 5 minutes of us, we all sat frozen, staring at each other. He then picked up the younger kids and took them to bed, refused to go back down. He's normally quite skeptic and scientific, and would be the one to laugh at everybody being scared and explain it away. He didn't, though. He just left in complete silence and seemed shook up. It's really unusual for him. My older kid freaked out and ran to her room, and I was the only one left. Went to the window to try to hear it better and was going to open the blind, but got a really bad urge not to. Walked upstairs with everyone else. Thought about locking the front door, but again, a bad urge not to, as it would make a lot more noise to do so. My instinct was to be quiet as a mouse and stay away. You couldn't hear the singing upstairs, although my window's directly above and pretty close to where it was. Think like a cottage. That was the end of that. He did go down later to lock the door and turn the lights off. No singing by then. Don't really know what to make of it. Doppelganger appears again. Over the last 20 years or so, various people have approached me and said that they've seen my doppelganger in my small town. This person seems close to my life by the locations they're at, but I've never seen them. The first time it happened, I was working in a stockroom. It was the stockroom of a shop, and my then partner texted and was angry. I ignored him at the top of the street of where my shop was. I hadn't left that stockroom at all. He said the person was my complete double. Went to a small fun fair and bumped into a friend. I had just arrived and was walking to a field from the car park. When they saw me, their jaw nearly dropped to the floor, and they asked me how I got over here to the other side of the park so quickly. They pointed to the other direction and said that they thought I was over there on the other side and just tried to speak to me. They said they could have sworn the other person was me. This person has been on my bus at times when I definitely wasn't there, 15 years maybe. He's been to the shops that I go to. I couldn't have possibly have been me. It seems like a lot of the time we're in close proximity to each other, but I've never seen them myself. Lo and behold, I walk into work this morning, and a lady who also works there says she's just seen my complete doppelganger in the building that morning just before I arrived. She couldn't get over apparently about how much this person looked like me. So strange. See ya.